our job as people who are trying to enable performance inside organizations is simply to shine mirrors on people. What you see in that mirror is a reflection of yourself. If you don't like it, you've got to confront that.
This is Entrepreneurs the Playbook, where I give you access each week to the world's greatest athletes and executives about their personal and professional playbook and what has made them champions on and off the field. This is the Playbook. This is Dave Meltzer, CEO of Sports One Marketing, here with Entrepreneurs the Playbook, and I have a special guest, Michael Arena. Now, not a household name yet, although you just wrote a book, so you never know how that works. But you are the Chief Talent Officer of one of the biggest, most famous companies in America, General Motors. Welcome to the Playbook.
Thanks, Dave. I'm thrilled to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, well, I want to get into, because you have such an interesting job, and I want to get into more of the philosophy of the playbook. Meaning, you have this job and you get to see so many different things, but, what do you think is the most dynamic thing that you can contribute as a Chief Talent Officer? You're in human resources, right? Fancy, huge title. Yeah. But where do you see your talents or the most important part of your job, what you do?
Yeah, so I think, so it's easy. I'm, talent. So talent is what I do. Talent is what I drive. And yet the reality is the way you make an organization come to life, the way you untap potential in an organization has a lot more to do with the way people are connected than the individuals you're bringing into an organization. So to answer your question very directly, it's, I'm in the human capital space, but it's social capital that's the answer to the question in regards to the way people are connected or not, in some cases, is a better indication of whether or not a company is going to be fast, agile, innovative, and productive over the long haul.
You said an interesting word, agile. You don't hear that. I worked for Thomson Reuters for years, and the big joke when I tried to make, as a vice president, agile changes, right? I would say I'm in my own way, but let's think outside the box. And they would say, we've been around, right? This is a UK-based Lord Thompson. We move at glacial speeds. How can you be agile in a multi-billion-dollar corporation?
Well, so it's, so in my world, we live in the era of disruption, right? I mean, just look at my industry and it's poised for disruption. It's already being disrupted. I mean, Uber was a non-entity just a few years ago. Tesla is rising out from nowhere, to sort of dominate the electric car business. So, we live in the era of disruption. And so being agile, is critical. Lack of agility is the kiss of death in large corporations. So I oftentimes use an analogy. Large corporations need to be, freightliners, which is what we know them as, these giant freightliners that are carrying huge loads and doing it very efficiently, but they also need to be speedboats. So I love this concept of how can you create speedboats and be a freightliner at the same time so that you can deliver at scale and efficiency, but you have these speedboats running around the edges of this freightliner that are constantly innovating, thinking like a startup, moving super fast, exploring the future possibilities, and then ultimately growing and becoming part of the new core as they get sort of heisted up and drawn into the freightliner.
We're growing into our first 100 employees at my company, and which is a great thing because Warren and I built this company 9 years ago with 3 people, and I see it as a huge accomplishment. But I'm able to build a company as a talent officer of my own company with values, gratitude, empathy, accountability, and effective communication. Do you have certain values that you're looking at as you're building the huge glacial big boat with the speedboat agility?
Yeah, it's for sure. So we oftentimes talk about the organization as the growth and the core side of the business. The core being the freightliner, the growth being these speedboats, and you have core values that you look at for both. I know that if I can keep these sort of speedboats separated, they can move super fast, up to 20 times faster. So there, you're looking over, you're acting like a startup. You're looking over the horizon. You're paying attention to what's happening in the outside world. You're really engaging the customer. You're studying the customer. You're looking for friction in the things that they're doing. You're trying to solve those problems. And then in the core of the business, you're trying to drive efficiencies. You're trying to act as one team. You're focused on alignment. So the real core, and this is the trick, is the bridges between those two. So I now think that the bridge people, now putting it back in the human capital lens, it's these bridge people that can link up these two entities that are probably the most special and most valuable inside, large corporations these days.
And when you're looking at hiring and changing within, because you disrupt internally, right? You're an internal disruptor in constantly growing and expanding. But I'm sure you look at the skill sets, the knowledge that they come with, but also desire. Where does the inspiration part of the business decision come? Is it first and foremost, or is it kind of the added cherry on top when you look at skills, knowledge, and desire?
Yeah, so I think most companies are pretty good at looking at skills and even desires more and more. What I really want to see in people is a fierce conviction, because it's hard to live inside of a large corporation. It's easy to become enculturated. So you need people that have fierce conviction and they have strong beliefs that they can push something forward and help to reinvent something. But they also have to have great humility. So the humility to recognize that they can't do it on their own. So the difference between a large corporation and a startup is one, much more of an individual entity, much more of a meritocracy. The best ideas rise to the top. That's not always true in a large corporation. So somebody who has the humility to be able to sometimes give up their own idea so that other people can jump onto it and you can evolve it in a pretty quick fashion is really critical.
Now, everyone has individual beliefs, and when you have thousands of employees, my father's favorite joke to me was, if you don't like somebody, wish upon them employees and overhead. Right? And at GM, there's plenty of overhead and plenty of employees. But do you believe in a collective belief that a huge corporation like General Motors has its own collective belief?
Yeah. I think you have to have a collective belief, especially as you're trying to reinvent and bring people along with you. But I don't think that has to sacrifice the individual belief, right? So my greatest fear, and sometimes where I feel like I can personally create malpractice, is if I force you to become enculturated to a set of beliefs that aren't yours. I think there's room for both, and I think while those things feel polar opposites at times, it's really your ability to be you inside of a large organization that makes that large organization special. If everybody starts to think and act exactly alike, it's easy to, I've been there before in my career, and it's easy for everybody to just shake their heads yes and head right off the edge of a cliff together. And that is a recipe for disruption. So you've got to have some, I call them challengers. You've got to have some challengers inside the organization.
People who perturbate the situation.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you've got to have people that are really challenging the status quo and causing other people to think differently.
And when people think differently, does that disruptive behavior ever cross over into a point where you have to make a difficult business decision and move that person even outside the company?
Yeah, I think that happens in every company. I think there are some people that end up serving their own agenda, end up being more about themselves than the overall business. So it's not just about challenging the status quo, it's about challenging it with your ego and challenge it in a way that you're propping yourself up higher than that greater purpose. And that's not good for a large corporation. Now, on the other hand, if you're a person who's challenging it for the best interests of an organization, we've got to build more and more tolerance inside large corporations for such.
What do you think employees want? We'll talk about the ego, right? Because we have the need to be right, the need to be offended, the need to be separate, superior, inferior, anxious.
Can just roll those
off. It
rolls
them off, right? Yeah, because I love it.
Yeah.
But I think I'm successful as an entrepreneur and as a business leader, and I've been CEOs of big companies and of small ones, but because I actually can allow someone to understand their own ego, and I know that there's more important things than what they're being paid. In your opinion, to feed the ego, what would you give advice to entrepreneurs, other than, because you can't pay, especially in startups, right? We can't pay big salaries and entice. What are the things that employees really want more than money?
So people want to be part of something bigger than themselves. So, at the end of the day, I think there are two really simple factors when it comes to what I want and what you want from a motivation standpoint. I found these to be, universal truths, and just about everybody I've ever talked to. people want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and people want to realize their full potential. So if you can create an environment where I can be my best self, and you can create an environment where my best self links into being part of a greater purpose, I mean, the potential is unlimited. So for me, that's all about how do you create social arrangements, how do you create an environment where people can interact, where people can sometimes challenge each other, where people can sometimes energize each other and lift one another up, to really believe that they can do something much, much larger. I think of, a story of this is, I think of what Jack Ma did with Alibaba.
Yeah.
Alibaba had none of the human capital resources that eBay had whenever they were rising up in China. They had none of the technical resources. They were a small company, but what Jack Ma knew was if he could energize his employees and he could get them to believe in a bigger purpose, that the potential, the sky was literally the limit. And I mean, one of my favorite stories of Jack Ma is, he literally, in front of 15,000 employees, opened up a stadium and lip synced a couple rock and roll songs.
Right, I saw that.
To simply motivate his employees to believe that if they attacked eBay as the shark in the ocean, they would get conquered. But if they acted as the crocodile in the river, being China, that they could seize the day. And of course, we know the rest of that story.
Absolutely. And looking at the ego in writing your book, do you think gratitude? I find that appreciation. In teaching that, I talked about that being one of the core values. I think a lot of executives, middle managers, and even employees don't understand the power of appreciation. Yeah. And just even the word appreciation, because Ma is one of the guys that appreciates his employees, right? Jobs appreciate, right? These guys, Gates especially, and Buffett, but they give this additional value, right? I appreciate, and those two simple words of thank you can be, as associates and peers, really inspiring, but beyond gratitude, that word potential. So here's my definition of happiness, which is the consistent, everyday, persistent, without quit, enjoyment of the pursuit of your potential. And I think, Michael, that's what you're trying to provide to your employees.
Yeah, and I love this juxtaposition of gratitude and appreciation with ego. I love the juxtaposition of the two. My mentor used to teach me that, her name was Kathy Dana Miller, and she used to teach me that our job as people who are trying to enable performance inside organizations is simply to shine mirrors on people. And if your ego is driving you, and I watched this lady at 75 years old undress these big, massive, sort of egocentric Prussian general type men, watch them literally break down into tears. And then 30 seconds later, watch her pick up somebody who was feeling oppressed in the corner, was not realizing their full potential, and through appreciation and gratitude would sort of raise them up. And I asked her one day, well, how do you do that? She says, I shine mirrors. What you see in that mirror is a reflection of yourself. If you don't like it, you've got to confront that. If you think there's something that's latent potential inside that mirror, you can shine, and it's an opportunity for us to have gratitude for everybody and everything that they can offer.
That's gold. So make sure you're using a mirror to yourself. I was trained, I'm a business coach, so Marshall Goldsmith is my mentor and trained me and does very similar things, and that's where the ego side, and he's worked with the biggest egos in the world.
No doubt
But he shines that mirror, and he does the exact same thing. I think it's remarkable, some of the conversations that he shares with us to teach us to say, hey, you big baby, right? I was like, it's hard to call a guy who makes $45 million a year, a big baby, but he puts it right there. I want to get into your book real quickly as we're getting down. So, it's different, but you wrote your own book. Tell me a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so it's really the concept of what we're talking about right here. How do you create adaptive space inside large corporations so that you can unleash potential? And for me, structure and hierarchy limit that. But if you start to think about different social connections, like how do we go discover, and then like how do we bring something into the world? How do we discover and find new ideas and not become insular? Then how do we bring it into the world, because ideas are cheap, and literally stand up a product, develop it, rapid cycle, just like a startup would, and then ultimately how do we energize and diffuse that across the organization? So I'm a social scientist by nature.
That's awesome.
Or by background. So So thinking about different social arrangements to try to get different things done inside of organizations is what adaptive space is all about.
And I find as an entrepreneur, someone who has ran larger corporations as an executive, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, down to these small ones, that as entrepreneurs, because this is for entrepreneur, that I think it's essential that you're reading these books, the big business books, because there's so much gold in there. What would be one piece of advice in your book that you would give to an entrepreneur or a startup?
So I think in entrepreneur, I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs, and they just despise large companies.
Right.
And
they're so similar,
my
right?
counter-argument is, why wouldn't you partner with a large corporation? Because it's the fastest way to scale to an existing customer base and to move your product line, your idea, your solution as quickly as you can into the world. And that's usually the hardest part for entrepreneurs, right? So I think if you can come to terms with these partnerships and build these bridges in an appropriate way, it makes a lot of sense. So I think entrepreneurs have a lot to learn about how to scale from corporations, and I think corporations have a lot to learn from entrepreneurs about how to move fast, be agile, and rapidly develop something in a very quick fashion.
That's awesome. Last question. I always ask something along these lines, but if you can give one gift to humanity, what would it be?
So for me, it's all about bringing people to life. I mean, it's really simple for me. I've got a motto in life, and you'll appreciate this. The motto is, and this comes from Crazy Horse. The motto is "Hoka Hey," and I don't know if you know what Hoka Hey means, but Crazy Horse used to charge onto the battlefield in something that he fiercely believed in for his people, not for himself. And he would scream "Hoka Hey," which is "Today is a good day to die." And I think for me, having that kind of conviction about something you believe in, but doing it for people, not doing it for yourself, which is what he was about, is my motto. And it's not that I want to charge in the battle. That's not the point. I want to open up space so that others can come to life. And if that means you've got to charge into battle to help that open up that space for other people, that's what I want to be about. That's my hope is, that people come fully alive, and then I think the world potential is unlimited.
Well, Michael Arena here, he elevates others to elevate himself, and with great conviction, which I really appreciate. And I think now you and I have become close friends because you are my kind of guy. Blessed to do a little bit of due diligence, but it just came to life here, and you brought me to life. And I look forward to further conversations. We definitely will have them. If anything I can do to be of service, please let me know. What a great guest. Make sure, give me the name of the book one more time.
Adaptive Space.
Adaptive Space. Make sure you grab it. Entrepreneurs and big business, big corporate people, there's a lot of great advice because it deals with human nature. And there's no better lesson to learn than human nature if you want to be successful. Once again, this is Dave Meltzer with Entrepreneur, the Playbook.